Stepping into the glowing red abyss that spills from the mouth of the unholy sanctuary, our avatar walks down to the basement below, entering the first and only dungeon.
The sanctity of this place has been fouled.
Unlike its sequels, Diablo takes place entirely within this tunnel system sprawling below Sanctum. As we venture downwards, eking closer to the demonic domain of the titular villain, we'll traverse through haunted crypts, damp catacombs, fiery caves, and into hell itself. Each visual tileset spans across 4 levels of the dungeon. The Labyrinth of Crypts covers levels 1 to 4, the Catacombs 5 to 9, and so on. Each progressively increases in difficulty, presenting new enemies who vary in attack strength, health points, resistances, and strategy of attack. Our faithful hero begins their adventure fighting melee-only monsters, feeble skeletons, slow zombies, and pathetic mini-demons. But it won't be long until you're running around dodging dozens of arrows and deadly magical abilities that can boil your blood. It's a fun time for all the family. With just 1 town and 1 dungeon den, Diablo is a deceptively simple game, a pure dungeon crawler, inspired by games that predated it by over 15 years. From a young age, David Brevik had always been a gamer, a big Dungeons & Dragons fan. His friends would enjoy many late nights playing Pac-Man and Asteroids on his Atari 2600 or sitting down to play D&D. At Brevik's school sat an Apple II Plus, a desktop computer at a time when computers small enough to fit atop a desk were still seen as a novelty. He used it to play games like The Wizard and the Princess, gazing in amazement at the fairy tale characters blinking on the monochrome screen. In the fall of 1979, Brevik's father brought home an Apple II Plus of his own. No longer did he have to wait to tinker with the computer, now he had full reign to play games and learn how to program his own. He would spend hours and hours typing code before he could even properly type. Utilizing the very early internet to call into BBSs and download illegal copies, Brevik would spend hours playing tons of different games. Where he could, he did buy a few games, but being a kid, money wasn't always easy to come by. There have been a variety of popular games over the past few decades that have fallen under the term roguelike. While the term has become so broad that it has lost close to all meaning past basic game design tropes such as random generation or permadeath, they all come from the mother game that birthed the genre, Rogue. Before the era of fancy PC graphics, Rogue's visuals were depicted via ASCII characters. Rather than a complex plot, there was a single dungeon romp. Go in, get the treasure, kill monsters, and if you want, kill the boss. The dungeon levels were randomly generated, never being exactly alike. While modern gamers who play RPGs for the story or graphics may scoff at this, frankly archaic title, these classic roguelikes were and still are incredibly addictive. The genesis of Diablo came from Brevik's hundreds of hours, arguably poorly spent staring at the ASCII dungeons of Rogue and Moria. He was a fiend for these games during his time in college, obsessed by the strategizing, tension, and gut-wrenching moments that came when things could and would go wrong. The turn-based combat gave the player enough time to consider every move and every possibility, but also painfully drawing out the fateful demise of a character you have come to love after many hours spent with them. You had ample time to try and save yourself, or watch on in horror as your hero was condemned to their fate. This tension was only raised further by the brutal choice to use permadeath. At its core, Diablo was to be the updated, modern version of those games Brevik had loved. The odd thing was that it had taken so long for these old monoliths of the fantasy adventure genre to be given a modern makeover. Dungeon Hack had tried in 1993, but it lacked the depth of gameplay that its visually primitive forerunners provided. That and it being a first-person game built upon the Eye of the Beholder engine kept it too visually dissimilar from its original inspirations to effectively respawn the oft-forgotten titles. Brevik already knew they had a winner on their hands based on the love that Rogue and its derivatives had once had. Diablo isn't an RPG as the genre had grown to know. It's an isometric action game like its influences, with strength not in its plot or storyline, nor in depth or detailed character development. Diablo puts its full emphasis on gameplay, exploring the darkened labyrinth, and it isn't long until we find ourselves approached on all sides by the undead. Something has awoken these empty vessels, and it's only through the smash of a club, the piercing of an arrow, or the cleansing of magic that they may be vanquished. The controls in Diablo are some of the most simple you can possibly have in gaming. There are means of making them slightly more complicated for streamlining gameplay with the use of hotkeys, but peeled back to its bare essentials, all you need is your mouse and the ability to left and right click. This can be a one-hand game, which is helpful if this is your kind of thing. Programmer Rick Sayes fondly remembered how Dave would shut his door to evaluate the game, and one of the things he'd do is play the game one-handed. Future changes to the control scheme were based off of that. How straightforward could they make them? As Dr. Matt Barton said in his History of Computer Role-Playing Games, the outcome is a game that fits the old adage, easy to learn but hard to master. If you can click a mouse button, you can play Diablo. As a result, gamers who had never played a CRPG before still found it intuitive and addicting, removed from the confusion associated with the game's contemporaries. Eric Schaefer explained how it was their goal to make a role-playing game that didn't require a whole lot of thought, that was just entertaining and fun to play. Most other RPGs were pretty in-depth and geeky, a lot of decision trees and dialogue that they wanted to skip. So well thought out are the controls that, unlike the competition that may require the memorization of 20 plus keys to progress, Diablo's controls help enhance the experience, not detract from it. They're almost innate. Left-clicking anywhere on the floor moves our character there, left-clicking an enemy sees the hero attacking them, and right-click aligns with the skill icon. Beyond the mouse, assignable hotkeys along the function bar allow us to switch to our favourite spells in a pinch, and the number keys align with our 8 belt slots, quickly consuming any potions or scrolls positioned there, and similar to Ultima Underworld, drag and drop works directly from the inventory window into the playable area. Holding down the left mouse button to move an attack provides a slightly more relaxing experience, but even if it is pure placebo, frantically clicking an enemy in the midst of a battle always feels more effective than watching helplessly. It's immediately apparent when we start clearing the first level of the cathedral that the team spent a lot of time considering the controls, and it only highlights how good of a job they did when Diablo is one of the few 90s RPGs that doesn't actually require its manual or any sort of tutorial to teach us the ropes. I've preached on this channel how older titles were often designed with the manual in mind, more times than not lacking any form of in-game guidance. Diablo may not have any either, but that's only because it doesn't need them. The manual, like many from this time, is home to a wealth of knowledge that will improve our understanding of the game, but its role as a necessity does not ring true with this game's masterful design. It did comically explain to people the difference between a left and right click. They've even got a handy diagram for those who are new to the fort. That alone goes to show just how important it was to Blizzard North that everyone could play, their mom test being the key behind all of this. The controls are rarely problematic, barring one instance. Generally speaking, the fastest way to move around is to hold the mouse button down in the direction you want to go, but when walls get in the way, your character will try to pathfind their way around it, usually taking a wrong turn right back into a pack of monsters chasing you. It's a problem that can be easily avoided by being a little more careful, but it's still highly annoying when it does happen. Simplicity carries over into the interface. Huge UI elements may not be in favour today, but it's a necessity if the game can be played with only a mouse. Despite its size, it's no larger than any other strategy game or CRPG from the time, smaller than quite a few actually. Gamers will feel right at home, and newbies can easily distinguish what everything is at first glance. Intuition took priority, and it's a key reason why this game has aged so damn well. The lower portion of the screen tells you what you need to know with a quick glimpse, but the ingenuity is most apparent on the UI pop-up screens. For lack of real estate, much of the required information like inventory, spellbook, and character attributes cannot be stored on the standard game screen. RPGs usually take you out of the action completely to enter a separate screen, do your business, and then return to the game. Diablo ingeniously used pop-up screens that cover only half of the action window at a time. This is all commonplace now, but stick with me here. In most other CRPGs, if we're stuck in a fight and you see that your weapon is about to break, hit an I to take us to the inventory, we're pulled out of the gameplay, have all the time in the world to make a decision, and all the time needed to calm down and prepare. That's fine in a turn-based game, but in real time with a focus on keeping the action fast-paced, such pauses give too much respite. Players earn a sense of accomplishment when they overcome great odds, when they succeed despite their racing heart. This is an action RPG. Action comes first. In Diablo, if you're fighting a gang of goatmen and you realize that you forgot to wear that new armor you just bought, you just click the Inv button to open the inventory on the right half of the screen, grab the armor and drop it over the chest icon. Bam! Now you're protected, and the whole while you've been able to keep fighting on the other half of the screen. It's similar to Ultima Underworld, which also allowed inventory management during live gameplay. Diablo's isometric click-focused style of combat makes its implementation less of a struggle though. The non-stop gameplay unlocks a whole other level of high-tier play, where we can flip in and out of various gear, switching out between whichever magical items and weapons may be best for the next fight on the fly, with no lull in the gameplay. And it can all be done without ever having to touch the keyboard. Can you imagine playing a Diablo clone without this expected functionality? We can only be thankful that this grandfather of the genre set the precedent. Using hotkeys may be smart, but they aren't required, and that helped Diablo's mainstream appeal immensely. The same goes for leveling up your attributes, picking up loot from the floor, choosing your next spell, or customizing your belt loadout. It can all be done with one hand. It wasn't the first to do this. Other RPGs such as Ultima 7 had similar mechanics, but its use was still rare. The inventory pop-up itself is a square grid of 10 by 4 empty spaces. The different objects you can acquire take up the grids from a single space for a ring or potion up to 3 by 2 spaces for a large cuirass or wizard's robe. The only limit on what you can carry is the space, not the weight of the items. A weedy mage can carry just as much as a beefy warrior, which may not make sense at first until one remembers that this is space-based, not weight-based. A backpack can only handle so much, regardless of its carrier's ability. Inspired by XCOM, the inventory management is akin to a game of Tetris, moving around the objects to best maximize the amount of valuable loot one can haul back to town. You'll usually find yourself stacking your gold, scrolls and potions along the bottom in a single or double row, so you can fill the top with various weaponry and armor. It works well enough, but without the player's intervention, the inventory system's defaults are rather dumb. It won't store the items you pick up in a sensible order, resulting in the hero informing us that they can't carry anymore when they definitely can. We fixed this with the aforementioned inventory Tetris, but I can't help but wonder whether a management minigame fits the design philosophy. With every other system streamlined to focus accessibility and action, this feature grinds gameplay to a halt if, like any good loot goblin, you wish to fill your pockets with as much as you physically can. There's an argument that the inventory space is too small. An RPGFan.com review from 1997 complains about each item taking up too much space, drastically limiting how much you can carry, slowing down the loot and sell process. While true, it's clear to me that this works for balancing purposes. Why else would it be a staple of ARPGs going forward? With no limit, players could enter the dungeon with a backup set of equipment they could switch to for any given scenario, like switching to fire-resistant armor when facing a specific type of monster, and then changing to another enchanted set afterwards. This is still entirely possible, but it has been balanced as such that it's an important decision to make. If you choose to do this, you are sacrificing how much loot you can carry, picking safety and dungeon progression over grabbing new items. The reviewer is right in saying, however, that no matter what, you will have to make a lot of trips back to town just to clean up your inventory, which I must agree does get annoying. Only more so when we'll find ourselves running the same loop around the town to visit the assorted vendors. True too is the complaint that gold in particular is a pain to carry. By the end game we'll be flushed with the stuff and have little room in our bag for anything else. Gold takes up 1 inventory square per 5,000 doubloons, which sounds like a lot at first, but we'll be rich with over 100,000 of the stuff by the end of the game. It is the only item that can be stacked, but 5,000 just isn't enough. You can drop the gold in town and it should be fine, but that just adds even more inventory management when it comes to making the rounds to the shops. With Devolution X, and any other modded versions for that matter, this is no longer as inconvenient as it used to be, as gold can be stored away in a stash that won't disappear, a la Diablo 2. The character and inventory windows are smaller in these modded versions too, so you won't need to compromise your field of view, as expected with a greatly improved resolution. Another minor issue corrected by the new engine is the shop inventory screens. In vanilla, it's missing vital information, namely whether a weapon is one or two-handed, leading to the inevitable heartbreak for a warrior specialized in sword and board. The last thing you want after saving up and spending over 20k on a weapon is to find that it's two-handed. A simple toggle in the modded version adds weapon graphics to the UI, so you can now see what the weapon is before handing over your hard-earned dough. For the on-screen map, the team took direct inspiration from Star Wars Dark Forces, where the automap sits atop of the gameplay so we can explore and fight and simultaneously analyze where we need to go. Since map movement and character movements are independent, you can even get an overview of the whole level while moving in a different direction too. This can be distracting at times, and Diablo 2's smaller corner-based alternative is sorely missed, but you won't find yourself requiring the map to be permanently open for casual play anyway. I only bring it up to find any doors or areas I may have missed in my endless goal of 100% in every automap I find in a game like this. It may not be the most time-efficient way to play, but there's something so satisfying about filling in the entire map and knowing that you've done everything you possibly can on this level before moving onwards. The belt is the vital component that ties the UI together. With it, we are able to heal and replenish our mana without compromising our playspace, or place magical scrolls there to quickly cast a spell without using the spellbook interfaces. This is a huge savior in tough battles, allowing the player to face tank any enemy as long as they remain well stocked with the appropriate potions. However, an odd interface quirk leaves a key flaw in how the belt reacts to the use of the shift key. By default, shift left click will automatically consume a scroll or potion from either the belt or inventory window, acting the same as using right click. Yet pressing shift number to interact with the numbered belt hotkeys won't work. This is especially irritating when holding shift so you can attack without moving during combat. If you forget to let go of shift as you hit the hotkey, you won't consume the item as intended. The difference between life and death when needing to use a health potion to save you from an otherwise certain demise. Combat then, in its most basic form, isn't very impressive. Diablo is extremely streamlined for the genre at the time, removing the complexities of attack directions or speed multipliers. Simply click, let the hidden dice roll, and watch as we either hit or miss. Despite this purity, as action is the key feature, it's also the most varied. One cannot use the same strategies for all situations. Combat becomes a surprisingly dynamic, fluid process, fluctuating greatly dependent on the character class played, the equipment available, and the monsters involved. Speaking of, there is a commendable degree of differentiation to the monsters, and for their time they are gorgeously designed and animated. The distinct art style shines through, ensuring each enemy type is easily distinguishable based only on its darkened shadow at the edge of your screen. They act differently too, determining which strategy you wish to use when encountering them. For example, the various clans of goatmen are cowardly and will run when attacked. However, if one counts on the late game Hell Knights behaving the same way, they'll meet an untimely death. Zombies slowly shamble around you, skeletons rattle towards you with deadly intent, acid beats spit corrosive puddles at your feet, and fallen ones retreat if you attack their friends. Their combat AI isn't bad either. In Daggerfall and other 90s RPGs, it's clear that your opponents are finding the easiest path to you with the sole goal of attacking. They had little nuance unless they could utilize a ranged attack, and even then they wouldn't run away if you closed said gap, making their ranged advantage ineffective. In Diablo, wounded or isolated monsters will often flee, and groups try to attack together, relying on numbers to overwhelm. They work their way around obstacles, and ranged attackers will keep their distance, usually retreating if you chase them down. Frustratingly well too if you're a warrior with no ranged abilities of your own. Some even have extra abilities like temporary invisibility and teleportation, so you always need to be on your toes. They don't learn from others' mistakes though, and can be easily persuaded to make dumb decisions like walking into a flaming hot wall of fire. The first few labyrinth levels are, of course, relatively easy. Most foes here are only strong enough to survive 1 or 2 hits, and they don't deal a whole lot of damage either, unless we get swamped. It's through flinching that they can easily cut us down. You see, every time we're hit, we have a chance to flinch. This immediately ends our current animation, forcing us to start another. For the warrior, this means that with enough bad guys around us all swinging at once, we'll be incapable of dealing any damage in retaliation. Even the most pathetic of demons can cut us down if we find ourselves in this position. The basic strategy then is to fight them on our own terms, ideally in a one-on-one situation where we know we can beat them in a fair fight. To do this, we must take advantage of their zones. Basically, if we drift into the zone of awareness that surrounds each foe, they'll notice the hero and begin to move closer. We can instead advance carefully if we aren't confident in our abilities, so as to try and not attract too many of them at once. A fan favorite trick that later becomes a survival skill is to force a group of enemies into a bottleneck. In the earlier levels, the easiest way is to stand inside a doorway, which keeps them coming in one at a time. Later in the dungeons, once doors are phased out, you'll have to use other obstacles like barrels or corners to achieve a similar result. Rogues and sorcerers in particular should pot as many obstacles in their target's path as possible. While these classes inflict great damage at a distance, they're next to useless in hand-to-hand combat unless specifically built with melee in mind, in which case you are actively straying away from their most powerful abilities. The advantages of a ranged form of attack of our own becomes clear when the enemy roster begins being heavily weighted in favor of archers and later on, mages. The warrior class will find themselves herding these foes like sheep, gathering them into corners to prevent them from skirmishing. Having to do this one by one grows dull in time, particularly because it feels like the AI reacts based on your click rather than the hero's actual movements. By which I mean an enemy archer will move in the opposite direction of our click as soon as we send the command, not when our character visually performs the movement. Leaning into this style of slower, calculated combat was intentional. Eric Schaefer said that the game had more tactical gameplay because many of the monsters would move at pretty much the same speed as the player. You could wake up one or two monsters and that's as much as you wanted to do. It may slow things down, certainly compared to the fast-paced sequels, but that's part of the original game's appeal. It's more of a thoughtful style of play. We can't just rely on stacking powerful items, skill tree abilities, and spamming a single form of attack until everything on screen is dead. Instead, the moment-to-moment gameplay requires more precise consideration behind your actions, especially when it comes to outmaneuvering the enemy AI to our advantage. Coming from Diablo 2, where movement speed is the be-all and end-all, Diablo's walking can feel like an eternity, but it's how you approach the game that matters. Diablo 2 is about speed, Diablo is about deliberation. It actually helps with the game's atmosphere. Diablo is meant to be a scary game, and while I'll admit it doesn't offer the same level of immersive horror as, say, Dead Space, its methodical walking, constricting darkness, and unforgiving difficulty is what will keep you on the edge of your seat. It's fear through failure. Tension is at an all-time high when you're surrounded by enemies, hoping to find a way to wiggle out and run to a more advantageous position, spamming potions and what spells we can in hopes of making it out alive, fully aware that you've forgotten to save in the last 30 minutes and everything is on the line. One mistake and all you can do is stare at the main menu, deciding whether to hit load or wallow in defeat. That is what makes Diablo so exhilarating in a way that its sequels aren't, unless you use permadeath. There isn't any dynamic respawning or waypoints to get you back into the fray. Every action matters more. For the stat nerds, there are only 3 key statistics which dictate the outcome of a combat encounter. They are primarily affected by our equipment or abilities, but attributes also play a role. AC or armor class determines how easy it is to get hit. With a high AC, attacks against us are less likely to succeed, acting more like a chance to dodge than actually absorbing any amount of damage like a damage reduction or damage threshold stat in other RPGs. And to exemplify its role as a dodge stat, adding points into dexterity will also raise our armor class. Arrows will pass us by, swings of an axe will bounce off of our armor, and claws fail to find their mark. Shields further assist our defensive efforts, and certain magical items can also add points to AC. The to hit chance represents our accuracy with weapons. The base to hit value is calculated via our dexterity before it is augmented by various enchanted items. Note that some items can even make the to hit chance worse. Finally, the damage rating reflects the amount of destruction we can inflict. Given as a range of values dependent on RNG, we'll strike an enemy for any amount within the range indicated. This is determined by our weapon, strength attribute, magical modifiers, as well as dexterity, although to a smaller extent. Between strength and dexterity, dexterity has the overall higher benefit, affecting each key combat statistic to some degree. Past a 100% to hit chance, dexterity becomes less important, as well as there, in my experience, being far more magical items that modify armor class and to hit chance than there are ones that increase strength or damage. Due to this item balancing, strength is still of high importance for warriors and rogues. An interesting idea in Diablo is that as you kill more creatures of a given type, you will be given more information about them. As the kill count increases, so does the knowledge of the creature in question, eventually learning their exact hit points and resistances. While much of this is intuitive, i.e. members of the fire clan are immune to fire, it's still a useful additional extra. Like the player, monsters can belong to one of 3 classes: undead, animals, or demons. Each class comes with its own strengths and weaknesses on top of individual feats. Undead creatures are the primary foes within the labyrinth and catacombs, are inherently resistant to hack and slash weapons, taking 50% less damage from them, while being weak against blunt weapons, which deal an additional 50% damage. The Holy Bolt spell is only capable of harming the undead too. Well, and Diablo himself, but we won't be getting to him for a while. Animals, also known as beast creatures, will enter the enemy pool around level 3 of the dungeon, with bats and minotaur-like goatmen known as the Khazra. Animals are direct opposites of the undead, weak to sharp melee weapons and resistant to blunt ones like clubs and maces. You'll notice that from level 1, you'll be facing these little demon fellas known as Fallen Ones. Just like the grunts in Halo, their presence isn't much of a concern to the player, except for their confusing denomination as an animal class, despite the manual categorizing them as soldiers of Baal, described as impish devils. When we analyze the final creature class, demons are entirely boring, no weaker nor stronger against any particular form of weaponry, with their only stipulation being that they are immune to Holy Bolt. But so are animals, so that isn't really unique. My theory then is that Fallen Ones and their variations are placed under the animal class so that they are extra weak in the early game. With most warriors likely using swords because, cliches, the Fallen Ones will easily be vanquished, helping new players gain confidence. Either that, or there was a disconnect between the programmers and the lore writers. The lore that calls them devils is relegated to the manual, and a side quest for Ogden concerning his ensign. It's possible that the programmers hadn't seen this and placed them as an animal incorrectly, or calling them an animal was a means of separating them from the higher class of demons. Imps historically are seen as attendants of the devil, a lesser being than the more important supernatural beings. Fun fact, the Diablo fandom wiki states that when the Diablo game launcher is open, it plays a deep evil laugh, assumed to be that of Diablo himself. When this laugh is sped up several times, it becomes the sound that the Fallen Ones emit upon death. However, this isn't actually their death sound. It's a little bit closer to the sound from a scavenger, but still not identical. Just another reason to not take wikis at face value, especially not when there is no given source. Outside of the creature classes, those individual resistances are an important consideration. The magical forces in the world of Diablo are quite unpredictable. All characters and most creatures are able to resist the effects of various spells. The hero has 3 resistant values: resist general magic, resist fire, and resist lightning. Normally these are all at 0, meaning that you're at the mercy of these hazards. Certain magical items grant resistances to some or all of the aforementioned values, like a Ring of Resist Fire for example. The maximum achievable resistance level of 75% makes you virtually immune to whatever the resistance is against. Still though, 25% of the damage received can be a hefty amount, certainly on the higher difficulties. Monster resistances and immunities will determine how you must face them in combat. For the warrior and rogue, it won't be too much of a consideration as you will be focusing primarily on physical attacks with melee weapons and bows. For the mage who relies on spells, it can make or break their effectiveness. As it takes 15 kills of a specific mob for the interface to highlight these resistances, you'll find yourself testing various magics trying to find which one works. Most resistances can be overcome with sheer firepower. What's 50% reduction going to do against a barrage of spell spam? But it's those pesky immunities you want to look out for, as they block 100% of that form of attack. Weapon choice also has an effect. Each type of melee weapon varies in speed, following standard RPG rules of daggers being fast and big two-handed axes being slow. You may preference raw damage, but the damage per second benefits of a faster swing cannot be overlooked, particularly when the swing animation can be so easily cancelled by an enemy attack. The more swings, the higher the chance of landing a hit and avoiding that deadly stun lock. Spells too feel different from each other. For example, the Chain Lightning spell is designed to be used on a swarm of enemies, firing extremely fast bolts of lightning in an outwards direction. The Fireball, on the other hand, takes a second to cast, and is best used from a distance with well-placed aim. It is true that many of the spells are simply variations of this Fireball, with alterations in damage output and magic type, but that's to be expected with a D&D inspired spellbook. Even so, the diversity is commendable. Lightning sends jagged bolts running through enemies, damaging many at a time. The Golem spell creates an intimidating stone ally to take some of the aggro. Telekinesis allows you to open or close doors at a distance to herd the hordes. Healing restores your lost health points at the cost of mana. Mana Shield replaces your health pool with your mana pool, effectively giving you double the amount of hit points, and so on. With the resistances system too, a Firebolt spell may be lethal in one situation, yet useless in another. To best survive the dungeons of Diablo, a magical based character will need to spec into an assortment of spells, not just overlevel a single one. By finding or buying bucks to learn and increase a spell's power, there are even visible differences as they level up, providing an aesthetic as well as a gameplay incentive to make your spells more powerful. The key reason, of course, being that the stronger a spell, the less mana it costs and the more damage it does, but a few extra sparks and whistles doesn't hurt either. The highest level of spell proficiency is 15. Temporary magic increases through enchanted staffs can raise the spell level to 17, yet the advantage is removed as soon as you stop wielding said staff, and the difference in power isn't great enough to be worth the effort of finding that item in my experience. All classes can cast spells, but the proficient sorcerer class benefits from being able to cast them more rapidly than the others. It isn't unusual to find yourself unleashing several spells a second as your mastery improves. While being able to control the game entirely by mouse is appreciated, it is with magic where hotkeys come into their own. There are two spellbook interfaces, the large one existing for the information it provides, the damage a spell does, and more eminently, the number of mana required to cast it. The window, however, takes up half of your game. This isn't too bad if all you're doing is grabbing a few potions for your belt, but switching spells on the fly like this is cumbersome, which is why the quick spellbook is a masterful stroke from Blizzard North, condensing the spellbook into a few icons you can pick in seconds. It does require some memorization on the player's part, but believe me, compared to some of the intense knowledge of arcane runes other RPGs from this era required, this is easy street. From the quick spellbook, we can assign custom hotkeys to any spell, limited to the function keys in the original game, but with Devolution X, we're free to pick whatever we want. I went for QWERTY myself, utilizing ancient muscle memory from years past of games like Dota 2 and League of Legends. With said hotkeys, a skilled wizard can switch between traversal spells like Teleport to damaging spells like Firewall in no time at all, even flipping between various types of offensive magic on the fly. Not many monsters in the game, barring their immunities, will be able to survive an onslaught of fire and lightning flying at them from all angles as the ghostly figure in the distance phases across the room in the blink of an eye. If you want to feel powerful, this is how you do it. It's not like this is even an exploit. Late game mages down in the hell levels will use this very tactic themselves, and it is through those bastards that I learnt the technique. Fight fire with fire, if you will. Before one can learn a spell, the player's character must have the necessary intelligence. Displayed as your magic attribute in-game, it can be raised as you level up, and again the sorcerer class will be stronger here, starting the game with a higher base magic level and able to upgrade the stat far beyond that of the warrior, hitting a cap of 250 versus the warrior's pitiful 60. Interestingly, the rogue is also able to hit the stat cap of 250, but does not benefit from the increased mana of the sorcerer. She's smart but not as innately talented. Scrolls with their one-shot affairs are ideal for builds with a limited mana pool size. As long as you have the required magical ability, they can be cast for free. Well, not free, they do cost gold, quite a lot of it too for the more powerful ones. A scroll spell is cast at the level known to the caster, unless said caster does not know it, in which case it is cast at level 1. Unlike health, which can be restored through scrolls, a spell, or from potions, mana points can only be replenished by that sweet blue liquid nectar. Keeping well stocked in these is vital, which means many a trip to and from Adria the Witch. Luckily, the town portal spell allows any character to travel up and back down to the dungeon as quickly as possible. No matter your build, it's this portal that will be your best friend, both as a means of convenience, but also as a last resort escape when your health is woefully low and you're stuck in a losing fight. You may not realize it looking at this footage, but magic was once even more powerful than it is in the retail version of the game, and is already unarguably the most overpowered form of play in that. The game's funniest development story was only possible due to how unbalanced sorcery was. A $100 bounty was offered to the first Blizzard staffer to kill Diablo.
And so we had this skill in the game called Blood Exchange. What this skill did is it swapped your hit points with a monster.
In seconds, the strongest foe in the game could be vanquished by stealing his health points, replacing them with comparatively none, and then casting a basic fireball.
Well, we didn't think that through, did we? And we promptly yanked the skill out of the game.
The original spellbook was set to have 5 pages. Blood Exchange, actually named Blood Ritual, was one of them. Left on the CD, we can find that the cut spells were Invisibility, whose icon graphic was reused for the teleport spell in Diablo 2, Blood Boil, Doom Serpent, Etherealize, and Sentinel. Some of these spells were actually implemented in the official Hellfire expansion that we'll look at much later. Page 5 spells were going to be the most powerful, and if you're curious, you can still access this page in-game. There's a tiny area of about 2 pixels in between the page 4 button and the border of the spellbook interface. If you click on this, a blank spell page appears with no corresponding button. A key factor behind why I believe Diablo became as big of a hit as it was is down to something that's a bit harder to put into clear terms. Fighting just feels good. It's enjoyable at an elementary level. Clicking an enemy, walking over, smashing it with a stick, and watching it crumble as their death whimper plays is satisfying in an almost carnal nature. And it has to be too, because it's the same action you will be performing ad nauseum. Had they got this wrong, the game would have been a chore to play, and when described as I just did, it sounds like it would be. And yet, progressing through the dungeon performing click smash or click twang or click zap is enough of a thrill to hold up the entire experience. It's hard to explain without actually playing the game yourself, but even for myself who had played far more aesthetically impressive games before Diablo, I still see the appeal. The developers were more than aware of this. Artist Michio Okamura acknowledges that if they couldn't have gotten the mechanic to feel fun and satisfying, they would not have been able to get the casual players to play long enough to get them hooked. It's what made Diablo so accessible to a larger audience, including people who normally didn't play RPGs or PC games in general. Eric Schaefer explained how the combat was of ardent importance during development. It was the fast reaction of the mouse click. There was no pause before your guy started the shamble over there. We reiterated on that over and over, and really just nailed a feeling that wasn't in most games at the time. We aimed to feel crisp, and your character would do exactly what you wanted when you clicked. We were always going for a tactile feel, a crunchy feel we called it. It's these sound effects tied together with pristine pixel art and daunting dungeon music that sets the atmosphere for Diablo's dungeon. There's a hopeless tone. Impaled corpses, slain adventurers, and burning crosses are common sights. Environments have a suitably gloomy and evil theme, with each tier of the dungeon ramping up the wickedness. Tristram looks like it's barely surviving, on the verge of collapse. The church has an air of unholiness not often associated with such divine architecture. As the design of each floor changes, you encounter more horrific monsters, and even the music itself morphs darker and darker. It's surprisingly scary, even though the gameplay itself is simple. You're basically clicking a mouse and not much else, yet through its masterful tone, it works. The labyrinth is unkempt and haunted, the catacombs are dark, cramped and gloomy. The caves mix wide open caverns with flowing rivers of lava and natural walls. And hell? Well, it's what you might expect. Goliath skeletal balustrades, obsidian walls filled with magma, and helpless tortured humans galore. For its time, Diablo's visual fidelity is fantastic. 640 by 480p spine-chilling SVGA graphics technology with 256 colors and taking full advantage of DirectX 3. The game rendered graphics at a level of quality with consistent frame rate that wasn't common. It's hard to imagine looking at it today in its vanilla state, but Diablo was known as a looker, with reviews across the board praising how gorgeous it was, despite its simplicity in the face of the steadily growing 3D market. Importantly, unlike those 3D games, Diablo could be easily run on a variety of machines, ensuring that their mass appeal strategy spread beyond the gameplay and into the hardware specifications. What use is it guaranteeing that a tech-illiterate parent could play Diablo if they wouldn't be able to run it? Discussing this strong atmosphere, Brevik claims that the reason that it feels like a real place is that the game is small. By keeping the amount of locations to a minimum, they were really able to make those flourish, a quality over quantity approach. Blizzard North's commitment to guaranteeing timeless pixel art graphics was laid out in 2003's post-mortems from game developers. Schafer explained how the team developed Diablo with almost no proprietary tools at all. They cut out all the background tiles by hand, and used commercial software to process the character art from their original 3D models into sprites that could work within the entirely 2D engine, similar to the techniques employed by a smorgasbord of Nintendo games or Bethesda Softworks with Battlespire and some of the Daggerfall sprites. What was proprietary is the lighting and fire systems. The team were unable to find any plugins that could do what they wanted, so they wrote them themselves. It was worth the extra effort too. The spells are made far more awesome by the pyrotechnics that spread across the screen. This was a huge deal in the 90s. After reading enough CRPG reviews, you'll notice that advanced lighting and fancy spells were a favorite among gamers. For decades, players had wanted video games to envisage magic the same way their imagination had when playing tabletop games, so any game that got close was commended. Diablo found much of its adoration coming from its impressive firewalls that ambiently lit the surrounding room as they melted all those trapped within. Blizzard North wanted to make a fantasy game that felt unique from the others on the market. Maintaining their theme of gothic-inspired horror, the artists dubbed their art direction Gothic Fantasy, combination of trying not to look like everything else and directly influenced by Schafer's love for the dark and grimy Italian zombie movies. They wanted it to be gritty and gory. This carried over to all aspects of Diablo's design. Artist Kelly Johnson articulated how whatever we make, from the smallest potion to monsters and environments, we wanted to achieve gothic horror. We didn't see a lot of that in the gaming world at the time. We didn't want to do anything that was known. Diablo was to be dark and bloody, standing in stark contrast with traditional high fantasy. It's brooding, filled with arcane magic and demonic rituals, both dangerous and sinister. Despite its primitive nature by today's standards, the horde of enemies veiled in darkness can still get your heart racing, especially when you're woefully under-equipped for the test ahead. While that may not sound pleasant, it is. A level of immersion you may not think possible from an isometric game, carried heavily by its visual styling and the pounding drums of Ullman's soundtrack. A lot of it has to do with the audio and visual feedback. Using a health potion produces a satisfying bubbling noise. Gold pieces clink together upon picking them up. Skeletons clatter in the pieces as they're defeated, and equipping heavy armor gives a metallic thud. The hero's footsteps echo as you walk. Weapon sounds are necessarily punchy. The twang of a bow, the swing of a staff, or the clash of a sword. Granted, you'll be hearing them often as there is a distinct lack of variation, but they manage to not get on your nerves as they're interspersed with other effects. Usually the ever so satisfying monster deaths. They perish resoundingly, whether with a grunt, moan, or squish. The ridiculous and sometimes humorous death animations combined with these sounds add a lot to Diablo's appeal. They explode, tumble, melt, crumble, collapse, fling their disembodied parts about, squirt bodily fluids, or disintegrate. The sound of liquefied brain matter sloshing on the dungeon floor. When you get right down to it, killing monsters is what this game is all about, so it was necessary that the reward for combat is as satisfying as it is. Fallen ones flop to the ground with their organs splayed out on the floor, hulking steel lords burst into white flame, and the succubus continues her seductress ways even in death. That last one is a little infamous, but given those demons' names and the theme of hell itself, it fits both the 90s RPG cliches and Diablo's world design. Kelly Johnson remembers designing them fondly. I was inspired because Michio made great models. The succubus is sexy, you know, so I wanted to make her walk very confidently, not like a typical demon. When a creature died, it had to fit in a certain space. That's why a lot of the death animations in Diablo involve disintegration. The body just disappears because after a while we couldn't come up with different ways to do the death animations in one spot. The succubus death was done so that her body would fit in the tile. The animation was very suggestive, it fit her character, and the guys in the office liked it, so it stayed. What is rare for the time is that not all of those sound effects are stock either. Brevik remembers how Ullman made the sound effects for skeletons breaking apart from some pencils and dice shaking around in a cup. What stock effects are used have been massively altered to a degree where even the discerning listener will be hard-pressed to recognize the origin, unlike say Morrowind and its swinging door noise being shared with a myriad of others, and even in television productions. There's nothing wrong with using stock effects as is, but the effort taken to morph them to suit Diablo displays a degree of care and creativity that was rare for video game sound design at the time. It wasn't until later that Foley design became more commonplace in game development. We've touched upon the Tristram theme, but Ullman's expertise carries down into the dungeon. Themes filled with low pounding drums and distant screams that grind away at your confidence, with a layer of doom re-amplifying a degree of badassery. In the background, electric guitar riffs help to sell Diablo both as a horror and action game. It's a fantastic ambient soundtrack. A brilliant review of Diablo's official soundtrack put into words why these musical themes are so great, far better than I ever could, so I won't even try. All credit goes to greatestgamemusic.com for these beautiful excerpts. The key to the soundtrack's success is Ullman's astonishing creativity in manipulating his guitar material. With constant virtuosity, he tweaks his guitar lines into surprising dissonances and off-kilter fade-outs that catch listeners by surprise, combined with a tasteful orchestral background that add feelings of both foreboding and sorrow. Droning cello and double basses, unsettling whining violin, wordless vocals that range from disembodied choirs to eerie moans, pounding percussion ringing out from the depths of the dungeons. Despite their quite minimalist nature, Diablo's tracks all develop well during their running time. They patiently roll out their slow-burning, tense ambience until the listener has been truly sucked in. The ingredients may be familiar, but Ullman manages to deploy them effectively on compositions that border on twisted sound collages. Other reviewers too rightfully gushed over the work. Adrenaline Vault's Brian Clare even gave it 5 stars, the first time he ever did so, noting how for years he had waited for a game to come out with a perfect musical score. The music is just as perfect as the sound effects in both quality of the sound and the score itself. Everything about it is perfect for the fantasy genre. Ullman achieved this exquisite result by a process of elimination, throwing everything at the wall until the final result was good enough. In his interview with Craddock, he recalls how composing Diablo's soundtrack was a process of grinding until things stuck. The first couple of months of attempts were bad. The composition process wasn't linked to each particular background during their inception. What became the opening cathedral theme was actually intended to be something like a final boss theme. Ullman's stylistic approach was to make the music more primitive, with more basic structures, generally consisting of 70 to 110 second chunks that fade into each other, with more metered and focused material, like a strong beat or bass line connecting each chunk, as they generally alternated with slightly more abstract horror-type material such as synthesizer cluster chords and distorted sound effects. As great as the soundtrack is, it is also limited, with only a few tracks. After enough time, I can't blame you for turning it off, but for those first few runs, it complements the atmosphere tremendously, never distracting from what is going on screen. Many sources online state that the original idea for the art style included claymation, inspired by arcade fighting game Primal Rage, but this is a misunderstanding by fans that has even made its way into the wikis. It doesn't help that Brevik himself has retroactively confirmed the use of claymation, even when lead artist Eric Schaefer has already set the record straight in his interviews with Craddock. It's not claymation actually, that story's kind of grown and festered. Really, the backgrounds were all 3D from the beginning. There was a popular arcade game at the time, Primal Rage. The game had models made of stop motion animation with articulated limbs, so it was the stop motion graphics that they used from that game that we explored, not the claymation aspect. We talked about maybe making monsters with stop motion models with articulated joints, and we were going to take pictures of those in various poses and put them in the game, but 3D was a better choice after they found the original idea to be both too expensive and time-consuming. The atmosphere continues outside of the game as well. The box speaks for itself as Diablo peers out of the darkness with the game's title soaked in flame. You know exactly what you're getting when you look at it. They could have gone the pulpy route using flames across the entire box or drips of blood, but in what is a delicate choice for these big box 90s games, they've kept it clean, using black as the background and only making use of blood red for highlights. It's surprisingly tasteful compared to the competition, where other games were trying to grab the customer's attention with bright and quite often gaudy artwork. Blizzard took the approach of simplicity, following the discipline of minimizing and refining to create a pure yet striking box art that actually stands out because of this. The ultimate goal of any piece of design is to make an impression. If a design achieves this goal, it's fulfilling its purpose of communicating and insisting upon a particular message. Within the design world, there is a general consensus that less is more. We consider simplicity to ensure a piece of communication has maximum clarity. Now, more than ever, simplicity has become so commonplace that the over-the-top design of these games has become more appealing in how it opposes the overdone minimalism of the late 2010s. Still, the contemporary looking design of Diablo's box art is timeless in a way I didn't expect before analyzing the artwork. The manual too drips of darkness and horror. You need only listen to this following passage taken from its first pages, a paragraph from Dante that perfectly sets the mood for the adventure that awaits you after your car ride home, engrossing yourself within the reading material. But I, in truth, have been once here before. That savage witch Ericte, she who called the shades back to their bodies, summoned me. My flesh had been long stripped off when she had descended through all the rings of hell, to draw a spirit back from the betrayer's circle. That is the deepest and darkest place, the farthest from the heaven girds all. So rest assured, I know the pathway all. Graphically, the isometric view was a no-brainer. The original inspirations, devoid of real graphics, were played in a top-down view, but Blizzard North knew if they were to modernize the forgotten genre, they were going to have to switch things up. One of the whole points of making a roguelike with modern 3D rendered graphics was that you could make things look really cool, but characters just don't look that great walking around from a top-down perspective. You see the guy's head and shoulders, and that just isn't right to get the full grandeur of the art we were making. The isometric angle puts focus on the design of the creatures and characters without becoming too detached from the inspirations behind those designs. It isn't perfect though. Some of the walls offer translucency to prevent the hiding of objects and monsters, but this isn't continued everywhere. The caves, for example, do not have the same visual effect, obscuring loot, especially as there is no means of rotating the camera. Not that that would be feasible, seeing as the game is rendered in 2D. A rotating camera, even if simplified to 4 main angles as in The Sims, would add additional workload that the team were not in a position to take on, and may not have even solved the issue if the object had fallen in a very unfortunate cranny. Fortunately, a sound plays to let you know when an item has been dropped, so you'll be ready to search for it, and better yet, with Devolution X, you can highlight items a la Diablo 2, which is a necessity of quality of life for myself. This perspective was based entirely on the original XCOM. Brevik reverse engineered XCOM to better understand how it worked. Everything took place on a grid, with each character and object occupying a lone tile, hence Diablo functioned the same way.
One of the very first things that we did is we said, well, what is the look of the game going to be like? And a game that we'd been playing a lot at that time was this game called XCOM. We took a screenshot, which was a difficult thing to do back then, of the game. We used this little cursor box. The shape, the size, and everything is exactly what it was in Diablo. So XCOM's graphics inspired the isometric look. In fact, Diablo originally had a selection box just like this.
This is one of the first artist mockups for Diablo. It isn't a real in-game screenshot, instead an assortment of what graphics had been completed, placed together to appear as if it were gameplay, essentially a test image to see how the level art fits with the monsters, giving the developers an idea of their end goal. It doesn't include any lighting, and yet it somehow ended up circulated everywhere by mistake, to multiple publications and websites, and at one time it was even on a prototype box design for the game, until Brevik noticed and had the designers remove it before the game shipped. I find that reading classic reviews genuinely benefits how I view these older titles, as they help me appreciate how seemingly straightforward visual effects were once of note. For example, this review from Chad Hansen at Gamezilla raves over the many nice graphic touches, like when using a spell, a swirling cloud of magic momentarily envelops you. When you break open a barrel and a skeleton doesn't just appear, but actually rises up out of the barrel as if he were crouching in it. And when you get better armor, your on-screen character actually appears different because of it, allowing you to tell which characters in a multiplayer game might be the most helpful or the most dangerous. These are all basic expectations today, but they really help the immersion of a game like Diablo, and it's only by playing even older games can you truly appreciate the advancement. Remember that this is a reimagining of Moria and Angband. The improvement is Goliath. Reviewers particularly fell in love with the monster designs, and to be honest, it's easy to see why. Even in their bit-crushed state, they are full of detail and were clearly designed by artists who love the lore of these creatures. Skeletons, for example, look as if they've been uprooted directly from a Ray Harryhausen film. The only complaint with the monster designs is how limited they are, not by skill nor passion, but by technical limitations. Diablo may have ran fast and on a variety of hardware, but that doesn't change RAM from being filled up. The game could only load in so many assets at a time. With oodles of memory assigned to the dungeon tileset, music and sound effects, the number of monsters each level could hold had to be curtailed. To work around this issue, palette swapping became the go-to method to bolster the bestiary. Instead of just a single skeleton, you could now have tiers of skeleton, tiers of goatmen, tiers of imps, and so on. It was this memory limitation that dictated where mini-bosses would show up too. Brevik remembered how a lot of the roguelike games I played had unique enemies, but they had set stats. We took it a little bit further and gave ours unique properties. You have to really pay attention to what you were doing, as these were tough fights. Of course, not everything has withstood the test of time. There are several FMV sequences that were nice back in 1996, but with today's graphics and video sequences, they are outdated. It's not a problem with the game, just one of the few aspects that hasn't aged well. In comparison to the 3D games from this era, isometric games like Diablo always tend to age better as long as the original artwork itself was excellent, which it thankfully is. In some ways, I would actually say that it aged better than Diablo Diablo 2 did. By being fully 2D, the transition to HD with mods has kept it crisp in a way that D2 couldn't achieve until its remake, which isn't a fair comparison seeing as that came with fully remade artwork, an advantage Condor Inc.'s original game didn't have. Wait, who's Condor Inc.? Didn't Blizzard North make Diablo?